Rolex has always been run by people from the marketing department. Mr. Wilsdorf was a merchant. Mr. Heinegger Sr., who came after him, used to run the sales in South America. His son was head of sales and marketing. Then there was a brief interregnum of 3 years where an ex-banker called Bruno Meyer ran the company. And then a guy called Moretti ran it, who used to run Rolex, their Italian sales operation. And currently it's run by Jean-Frédéric Dufour, who has always been a salesman. He was sales at Chopard and at Zenith. It's always been a sales operation, so that's how it's been focused. And everything we think of about Rolex is whether it seems obvious or not, is actually about sales. It's about how do we make the brand stand out. One of the first things they did to make the brand stand out was to have a name. And that means, that's bizarre because we think that everything has a name. But believe me, in the early days, when Rolex started, if you bought a watch, you went to your local jeweler, you asked what they would recommend for you if you had 3 guineas or 10 guineas to spend on a watch, and they would recommend something to you. And the watch would be something like this. We call this a transitional watch. In essence, it's a very small pocket watch. It's a simple round case, just put some lugs on it and put it on a strap. But it has no name on the dial. This is a Rolex. It's from 1915. It's very early. It's what we call a trench watch, but it has no name on the dial. And Wilsdorf's big plot was to somehow or other get a brand and get that brand on the dial and make people want that brand. And all his efforts over the next 40 years were about getting the brand name noticed. So the first thing he did, and it's key to understanding the other main difference about Rolex. Rolex, unlike all the brands that everybody's mentioned, wasn't founded in Switzerland. Rolex was founded here in London. And it's important to understand why that location was really important, because at that time, 1905, London was the heart, the commercial and corporate heart of the biggest empire the world had ever known. And yeah, the British conquered a third of the world, but we didn't do it with an army. We conquered it the way the Americans have conquered the world now, commercially. Britain was a commercial empire. It wasn't a conquering army, like a conquering empire like the Roman Empire or the Spanish Empire. India, which was the crown jewel of our colonies, was actually run by a private company, the East India Company. Britain was the heart of a commercial empire, and if you wanted to sell products worldwide, London was the place to be. And so what Wilsdorf did was he realized that if you're going to get your name known, you need to have a name that people can pronounce. In 1905, 1908, 1910, the name Wilsdorf and Davies was a bit clunky. It could have been a department store. It could have been a butcher. It didn't have a luxury sound to it. It didn't have anything. It didn't gel.
It's not like BQ watches. No, it didn't quite go as well as that.
You said that you'd talk after me. Look, I explained to these people before. First round, we're drinking water. Second round, I'm drinking beer.
And then we're whiskey.
No, cognac. But nevertheless, so what Wilsdorf did is he did what a lot of people were doing at that time. He created a brand name. And we genuinely do not know where it came from or what it means, because it doesn't mean anything. It was a time of brands. Everybody was doing it. You look at people, you look at brands like Kodak, look at Castrol, look at Oxo, look at Bovril. They're words that don't mean anything, but they are, you can use them in any language, and they don't mean anything bad in any language. And also, they have the great advantage of being short. So if you print them in an advert or something, you can make the letters big. If you put Wilsdorf and Davis in an ad that's 2 inches across, the type will be 1/4 of an inch high. If you put the word Rolex in a thing, the type could be 2 inches high, so it stands out. The other thing that was crucial at that time was the rise of national newspapers. As I said before, you wanted a watch, you went to your local jeweler. They would you asked them what you wanted, you told them how much you had, what you were looking for, and they would recommend something. The key thing about having national newspapers distributed by a fully functioning national rail network was that everybody in the country could read the same newspaper at the same time every morning. So it now became possible, and it now became worthwhile to advertise a brand. So instead of people going into their local retailer and saying, I've got this new camera, what kind of film should I use? Or what film can you recommend for me? The guy said, oh, you want the new Kodak. The new Kodak is fabulous. And you'd read about Kodak, you'd seen it. And so you thought, oh yeah, I've heard of that. Yeah, I'll try that. And the same thing with Rolex. You walked into the jeweler, I've got 7 guineas to spend on a watch for my husband. How about the new Rolex, madam? And that, again, is all about marketing. This was something that other brands weren't doing. They were still relying on the retailer as the principal outlet. And then along came the masterstroke. Rolex was able, because of their advertising, to convince the retailers to put the Rolex name on the brand, on the watches, for about half the watches. The other half, the retailers insisted on receiving the watches with no name on them. And the reason for that was so they could put their own name on them. You would see, I've seen early Rolexes with Northern Goldsmiths, with many names. I know the watch, the Rolex was inside it, signed Rolex on the movement and on the case, but the dial is signed by the name of a retailer. And what Rolex did was, you could buy their watch, as a retailer, you could buy their watches with 3 options for the dial. You could buy it blank, so you put your own name on it. You could buy it with a small Rolex above the subsidiary seconds so that your name could then go at the top, or you could buy it with Rolex at the top, and if you wanted, you could put your name at the bottom, or maybe not even put your name on it. Rolex realized that they needed to have a unique selling point. They needed to have something that differentiated them from other brands so that they could make all their watches have the brand on them. And what he came up with was the Oyster. And it's always been assumed that the Oyster it is known as the world's first waterproof wristwatch. Actually, it wasn't, but nevertheless, the waterproof, its ability to stand up to water, was actually a fringe benefit. That wasn't the real reason for designing it. The real reason for designing it was to keep out the one thing that was the real enemy of watches at that time, which was dust. Dust was much more dangerous to watches than water was, for the simple reason that nobody ever took their watches near water. Nobody makes a waterproof television now because nobody takes their television into water. So there are no waterproof televisions. There were no waterproof watches because nobody ever took their watches into water. It wasn't there was a demand for it. What there was a demand for was something that was dust-proof, because dust was the real enemy of watches. The oils they used then were natural oils made from animal byproducts. And the problem was when dust entered through the winding stem, or if it had a snap back which was not hermetic, the dust would be attracted to the oil. And the thing is that all the components of dust, which is human skin flakes, cotton and wool, specks and soot in the atmosphere, all of those are carboniferous and they attract oil, they soak it up. So what you got was, instead of this nice, smooth, silky lubricant that was at the top and the bottom of the pivots, you got stuff that congealed into a grease. And as more dust was attracted into it, and it solidified, and instead of becoming a lubricant, it became an abrasive. It would wear the pinions down, it would wear the bearing areas of the watch, and it would eventually cause the watch to stop. And so the key thing was to try and prevent dust getting in, and that's what the Oyster was designed for. And the fact that it was able to cross the channel around the neck of Mercedes lights wasn't proof that it was waterproof, which it was, but the key thing was it enabled people understood if it's proof against water, then it must be proof against dust. And that was the key thing. And that, the launch of the Oyster, was the thing that enabled Rolex to demand that the name of the brand was on every single watch. And again, that's a marketing decision. It's not a watchmaking decision. And that's what Rolex has always been about. It's about selling the product. And they have always been really, really good at it. And that's how they went. And until he died in the 1960, Wilsdorf always talked about the performance of the watch, what it could do. Waterproof, accuracy, all of those things. All of his advertising then was about, this is the best watch for you because it does A, B, and C. After he passed away, two changes came about. The people who ran the company remained the same, but two external organizations got involved. One was a man called Mark McCormack, who at that time was an agent for 3 golfers. And the other one was a London-based division of an American advertising agency called J. Walter Thompson, who were the world's biggest advertising agency at that time. And together, they came up with a completely different strategy for Rolex. And they moved away from performative advertising to what's now called aspirational advertising. And that is still the kind of advertising we see now. You look, back then it started with adverts like men who guide the destinies of the world wear Rolex. Now you see the advertising just says, reach for the crown. It's all about desire. Rolex understands something crucial, which is that Rolex have moved from being a very good watch, which it pretty much always has been, to being a social signifier. That people wear watches now out of choice. Everybody in this room has a cell phone which is more accurate than any watch will ever be. But we wear watches because, for 2 reasons. We want to and we can afford them. That's it, you know. And the reason we want this Rolex or a Rolex rather than an Omega Swatch is because it makes you feel good about yourself. It makes you feel, you know, I deserve this. You know, we live in and around London. You want to get from one side of London to the other? A Toyota Corolla will get you there as quickly as a Mercedes S-Class. But the Mercedes S-Class makes you feel better about yourself. And I think that's what it comes down to with Rolex now. It's an aspirational object. I liken it very much to Apple. You know, you can buy an Android smartphone for 250 quid, or you can buy the new iPhone. They both essentially do the same thing, but one just feels better. One's just nicer. And it's the same with the Toyota and the Mercedes. And it's the same with any watch that you can find anywhere. And the watches that are aspirational. And the watches that are aspirational aren't just Rolex. You know, Pateks are aspirational. Some models of Cartier are aspirational. And people buy watches now. Nobody I know buys a watch and says that nobody walks into a jeweler's to buy a Rolex and says, well, how accurate is it? And let's be honest, that is the primary function of a watch, is accuracy. Now, people buy Rolexes and other aspirational watches because of how they make you feel. And if it was just about timekeeping, if it was just about being able to know if you're late for the dentist or not, I wouldn't be writing books about it. It's the emotion that matters. And there is, in watches, a great deal of emotion because it's a personal thing. It's on your body. Even though this is more accurate, it's never part of you. It's never next to your skin. These are everyday things. For a man, it's a wedding ring and a watch. That's pretty much the only jewelry you have. So it's, you know, my wife can express herself in, she has so many necklaces and earrings and God knows, she has this plethora of choices. I don't. I have a watch and a wedding ring. And even though the most popular Rolex in the world is actually the ladies' watch, the ladies' Datejust is more popular than any other watch, any other model they make. We tend to think of Rolex as a masculine man's piece. It just feels like that. And you know, it's easy to say, well, why don't they do this? Why don't they do that? You know, if they did this, they'd be better. I always say when people say that to me, yeah, I admit Rolex could be better, but I wish I was as wrong as Rolex. You know, if they're screwing up, look how good they're doing. Anyway, any questions? Yes, sir.
Why did Rolex stop? This is something I'm asked all the time, and I can't give an answer. Why did they stop that lost and stolen list?
Pardon?
Why did they stop doing that?
Doing what?
The lost and stolen.
I have no idea.
That, for me, and I'm asked every year, several times by people, that I can't believe how you think you have a house or a car or anything, you have a lost and stolen. Why they done that, I have no idea. They could have charged whatever they wanted, but give the information.
The only reason I can think of was that was purely a Rolex UK operation. It was not central. So all you needed to do if you were stealing Rolexes was to take them out of the UK and nobody would ever know. So it had a limited usage. Also, if somebody stole a watch in Bavaria and brought it to London and you ran it through the list, it wouldn't show up as stolen.
Are you sure that it was only in the UK?
It was only in the UK.
It's St James's Square only. They said it was a manpower.
Yeah.
Rolex should have adapted.
I mean, look, when I used to run jewellers and pawnbrokers, we'd run it through Rolex. They'd fax us back in those days, sort of 90s, early 2000, and often we would get the police turn up. But we weren't upset. We were upset if we'd lent money and then the police turned up. But if it was before we'd lent money, no problem at all. But I think if it was only the UK, it should have been done in worldwide. Why not? And again, you might not have got to the pandemic that you've got of where you got to with it, I think. Anyway, sorry.
No.
Yeah, I was going to sort of ask a question. I find it amazing. You're saying that the Rolex is so fantastic and they emote emotion and all that. Why aren't other watch companies looking to see what Rolex did and trying to recreate this thing?
Driving down here,
Yes.
we had the discussion about
I mean,
this.
it's a beggar's belief. 1.2 million watches, market share, mind share.
Is that the number these days, 1 point?
About 1.2 million a year now.
If you include Tudor.
Okay.
Sorry?
If you include Tudor.
I thought Rolex
No, I
was...
think it's just Rolex.
I thought they were about 1 million, 960.
About a million.
My understanding is it is just touching seven figures. It is not.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But that's still a hell of a lot.
No, it is a third of the entire Swiss watch industry.
Yeah. So why hasn't? I mean, like, are they that egotistical? These other brands that they
No, but
they can't recreate what Rolex did.
if you want to create what Rolex did, you have to start 60 years ago. So it's possible that some of the brands who are around now could be doing what Rolex, could be in the position that Rolex are now in 60 years from now, if they get their act together.
Who though? Who do you think? If you had to name, I can't.
Well, they'd have to gut themselves and pretty much start from scratch.
I'd say the prime candidate is Omega, but they just double down on getting it wrong every time.
No,
They never play it the way that Rolex do. They
No,
don't market it.
the problem that Omega have, this guy sells watches. Okay,
Sometimes.
what are the most desirable brands?
The Rolex. And you
Yeah,
know what the
yeah.
second and third most desirable is? Rolex and Rolex.
Okay, the most desirable brands in new and used watches: Rolex, Patek, Audemars, Richard Mille. They're all based in Switzerland, but that's not important. The most important thing about those brands is they are all privately owned. Omega's problem, and it will always be its problem, is that it is a publicly traded company. And they're more concerned with the stock price than they are with customers. And there are no publicly traded companies making watches who are on the desirable list, because their target isn't the client. The target is the shareholders.
I think one thing I've noticed about Omega, however, is when you purchase an Omega watch, like in terms of like the presentation, the box, the craftsmanship even, you seem to get a lot of bang for your buck, perhaps even in comparison to Rolex.
Totally agree. I agree with you. Look, if we want to criticise on Rolex or certain things, I think Rolex as a watch is amazing, but I think there's a lot of areas. If you put people in marketing, they could do more with their boxes. They should report on things that are stolen. I think there's a lot more they could do. But the one thing that, for me, and having handled tens of thousands, probably about 100,000 watches, not all Rolex, but a big number of watches. What I think is incredible, and a bit like Mercedes, they don't change their models too much. So at times when I have a 50s or a 60s or a 70s sub, a Daytona, you don't know how old it is. It's amazing. I always say to
Rolex evolves. It doesn't radically bring in new models every year. You can't tell a 2021 date just for 2025, or maybe a 1995 one. And that, bizarrely, has no benefit whatsoever to Rolex, but it has a huge benefit to the customer, because it means that if they buy the watch new, they can wear it for 20 years and nobody will think, oh, look, they're wearing that old piece of shit. And secondly, it means because it doesn't change, it retains its second-hand value. So it's perfectly possible, and it used to be, I mean, even before the market really took off 5 years ago, it was possible 15 years ago to buy a good Rolex, wear it for 10 years and sell it for what you paid for it.
Or more.
Yeah.
Or more.
But is that not just design and marketing working together,
Yeah.
getting it right? And they don't need to invent new stuff. They got it right, and they just
Yeah.
got it right.
But it's, yes,
You know,
but
they've never gone radical and gone with that. Like other watch brands have.
But again,
Just got it.
if you go back to cars, if you compare it with cars like Mercedes or Porsche, much the same. They don't change it that much. And like James says,
Well, a BMW
when
dashboard from the 1970s looks very similar
Yes,
to even today.
yeah, agreed.
That's another company that's just kept it true.
But like James says, you can have a watch that's 20, 30 years old and it just gets better with age. And, you know, going back, I've been handling these watches for 25 years now. And some of them, I often say to clients when they've got a 35-year-old watch, they age better than humans, yeah? And they get better. And then you go into the reverse cycle where they become vintage and all you have to do is look after them or put them in safe. And sometimes they're worth a ridiculous amount of money that you've never imagined. But like James says, it's connected to you. You wear it every single day.
Pardon?
This illustrates that point.
Yeah. So again, that's what is that the 50s piece?
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, that's what 72 years old. But that's exactly
I'm wearing
it.
a 30-year-old watch.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sorry, you touched upon something when you mentioned the last 5 years, and that kind of reminds me of like COVID. Can you shed some insight on, I would say, the perception of supply and demand, how it's evolved over the last 5 years, and perhaps even like the, for want of a better word, the moral aspect of it as well?
Well, I'm not going to make any comments whatsoever about morals because A, I'm not qualified, and B, we all have different moral compasses. But what I will say is what we saw at the turn of this century was what's known as the perfect storm. You had a confluence of many things coming together at the same time. One of the first, and something that most people don't think about, was the fallout from the 2008 economic crash. After that, almost all the central banks reduced interest rates to almost zero. So money was pretty much free. That happened. Then, when COVID came along, if you had a nice middle-class job, you got paid between 60% and 100% of your salary.
And you didn't have to do the job.
And you weren't doing anything. But crucially, you were looking at the TV each evening and you were seeing another 2,000 people died. Another 3,000 people died. And people had a caveat emptor, sorry, not caveat, they had a carpe diem moment that people had thought, you know, if I get that next promotion, if I get this, if that happens, if we sell the house, I'm going to buy my wife a Birkin bag or I'm going to buy myself a gold Submariner. And they looked at the world and said, fuck it, I'm buying it now.
James, as well, I think what you're saying there is true. And going back to your question of supply and demand, everyone thought that. So everyone's sitting at home, their bank accounts going up, they can't buy anything, they can't
go on holiday.
And
Can't
that's
go to
when,
restaurants.
obviously, 2022 was, things were, I mean, we used to buy a watch on a Monday, And I didn't worry about selling it because it was worth more on a Friday. On a Friday I'd sell it, and the following Monday I'd have to buy the same watch for more than I bought it the previous week. And that's what was going on.
Yeah, I hear you, but I guess what I was getting at is partly there was kind of a lot of kind of speculation about their manufacturing kind of shrinking because of how
No, the manufacturing shrunk because factories were closed for 4 months.
Yeah.
So you have to understand that people always say, why don't Rolex just make more watches? You can't run a factory at more than 100%. The factory runs at 100%. So they can't make any more watches than they do now.
James, they're building a new factory as we speak. I'm not sure when it's going to be.
Okay, well, I'm meeting with the CEO of Rolex next week, and the question I've got to ask him is, why are you building a new factory? Because I don't see how it's going to help. What you have to understand is that Rolex currently have 4 factories. One makes movements, one makes dials, and does all the jewellery work. One makes cases and bracelets, and one does the final assembly. So each of them, they form a chain. Now, if you make one more factory, what's it going to do?
Well,
Is it going to do some of each? I don't quite know why they're making another factory.
And instead of producing 1 million a year, let's just say they increase it to 1.5.
But I don't understand how they can do it, because the only way to make watches, you need movements, you need cases, you need bracelets, you need dials. As far as I know, none of the factories are capable of increasing their output. So if we build a new factory, that factory has to make all the 4 components for it to work.
Yeah, but it's not a new factory they want extensions on the other ones
Yes.
they've got. That would make,
Yeah.
that would increase production.
Presuming it's already, because it's already being built,
Yeah.
exactly what's going to go on there.
Well, they know what's going on there. They haven't told people like me.
Well, James, maybe you come back to us once you have
Well,
the meeting.
Has it?
No, I mean, I will be meeting. I'm meeting the CEO of Rolex next week. Next Wednesday, he's doing a question and answer session, and I'm sitting on the front row.
Where is that, James? Is that Dubai?
Dubai Watch Week. Yeah.
When is that, Dubai Watch Week?
No, it's next
When
week,
is-
next Monday.
It
Starts
starts.
on Monday, 19th.
It starts on Wednesday.
Yeah, 19th of...
Yes, starts on Wednesday. Yeah. I fly out next Tuesday. Yeah.
You know, also touching upon the morality point, when I was ready to get my first Rolex, I went into Watches in Switzerland in the shopping centre in Kingston, and then the guy just had such a blasé attitude, and he let me try on one, and I don't like fluted bezel, one fluted bezel black dial just, and then the watch that I actually wanted is, well, you can wait 8 years for it, and then I'm just sitting there and it's like waiting for somebody to manage the situation and try and kind of, but he's just sitting there like with a smirk on his face with a real snobby attitude, and I'm like, well, I don't think I really want to go back here again, and I came to BQ Watches.
So when was this?
There's one other thing I wanted to say really quickly, is that I've heard so many anecdotes of other retailers who are like, well, you know what, I'm ready to get my first watch, and they just went straight to, after their poor experience, they went straight to Omega, and then, so is it a case of it doesn't really matter, or that they've lost customers, or because they're so in demand, or, I mean,
That's Watches in Switzerland problem.
So that's
I've
interesting.
had good and bad experiences with the same store.
So the question is, what's Rolex connection to the authorised dealers?
authorised dealers, yeah, but then they are representatives of, I'd say.
Well, this is the question for James. So how much can they dictate the attitude of a authorised dealer? They can't tell them how to deal with
You
them.
might have been the 100th person who walked in that day and said, I want some Maryland. I'm not saying you were, but
Yeah, it's a
bit
they
more
must
the
get
answer,
asked so
yeah.
often.
Yeah,
But if you wanted a gold one, you'd be served.
yeah, but then I think that directly bolts on to people just having, all right, that's one side of it. But then the other side of it is just having to wait bloody months on it. Do you know what I mean? Being told that you're going to wait 8 years is like,
Yeah.
yeah, all right, yeah, cheers.
And yet, despite the fact that you can walk into Amiga and buy a watch, Swatch Group has now been delisted from the
Swiss exchange, yeah.
index.
It's not a Rolex.
So that they are
If you want a
really
Rolex,
Why? Why is that?
because they just have collapsed. It's not just Amiga; it's Tissot, Longines,
Yeah.
What,
yeah.
They've been delisted. They've been removed from the basket of goods that are used to calculate Swiss inflation rates. So, like we have in the UK, we have our CPI and RPI, the Swiss version. Now, Swatch is out of it.
Have we seen any big changes now that Rolex own Bucherer?
I don't know. There's a famous thing where the Chinese Foreign Minister Zhou Enlai was asked, what do you think of the result, what do you think the implications of the French Revolution, which was like 200 years before, are, to France? And he said, it's too early to tell. And I think, it's way too early to tell about the Rolex Bucherer thing. It is the single biggest purchase that Rolex have ever done. And it has the possibility to change the business completely. But my feeling is that if your watch is in Switzerland now, I mean, I know Brian Duffy very well. I'm sure that he's very happy because I think that Bucherer are likely to get fewer Rolex watches now than they did a couple of years ago. Because if Rolex favour them and start giving them more watches than the other listed companies and independent retailers, they're likely to run into competition authority trouble. So Rolex like keeping their nose clean. So I think they're likely to lean on the other side.
Where they're selling other brands.
Yeah.
But we've seen Amiga set up their own boutique networks, whether they're owned by Amiga themselves or.
No, they're all run by authorised dealers.
Yes, but there's a core of them in London which are owned by Amiga themselves, and then the other ones are
Watches of Switzerland,
Watches
usually.
of Switzerland, for example. So they seem to be wanting to disassociate from ADs and almost counter to what you're just saying. They're so directly to consumers via their own retail, well, the ones that they own. It's interesting that Rolex would. So there's no one talking about anti-competition practices in Amiga. Amiga pulled out of Bucherer as soon as the Rolex deal was announced. They all got tired of their watches being used as a stepping stone to purchase history for the Rolex, and they thought that devalued their brand as a result. So
I don't think it was specifically that. I think it was that Rolex implemented CPO.
yes,
The
that's it.
CPO then takes Amiga away from
Yeah.
So you don't have to buy an Amiga, you can purchase a Rolex.
Well, yeah, there is that. There is.
The reason why Watches of Switzerland closed 16 of their stores in the UK this year, that's not really been in the public eye because
Right.
the brands are saying, okay, but we need to represent ourselves, and they've looked, to open up on Watches of Switzerland, open up Tag Heuer branches,
Yeah.
boutiques are popping up. There's quite a few of them that are going to be announced next year in the UK, and Amiga may go alone in Utrecht and Watford. It makes you think, wow, they've got a Tag Heuer boutique. Goldsmiths is there, which is now part of Watches of Switzerland. Ernest Jones has been bought out by. There's been a shift actually in terms of the control of the market on the retail side. So
Interesting.
James, I noticed on that early Rolex, the first one that didn't have Rolex on the dial,
Yeah.
it had Mercedes hands, it had the hour hand.
No, it's not a Mercedes hand. The origin of the Mercedes hand does actually start with this watch because
I'm amazed to see, like up there now, and they all have,
can we put this on the screen?
they all have that significant hand, and that first one with no name on it,
Yeah.
it doesn't say Rolex, but it has the hour hand.
There you go. It has what are known as cathedral hands, and cathedral hands.
Yeah.
There you go. The purpose of the cathedral hand is because They want to get the maximum amount of luminous onto the hand, but it's held on by surface tension. So you can't make this a one big circle with no other support in the middle. So the Mercedes hand does exactly the same thing. It is breaking it up so that it's a manageable size, because it goes on as a liquid.
Yeah. But it's almost like
Yeah.
now is the design is the, you know, it's evolved.
Yeah. No,
Recognise the watch because of the simple things. And like, it doesn't say Rolex.
No.
But it has the, you know, the historic.
Many other brands use this style of hand. When Rolex introduced that style of hand, the Mercedes, what we call the Mercedes hand, it was launched as as part of the high visibility dial. It was launched with a very specific dial, which had Roman numerals at the bottom, Arabic numerals at the top, and the hands with a Mercedes hour hand and a much fatter minute hand. And the key thing was actually the dial. The dial was twice the thickness of a normal dial, and the numerals were stamped very hard into it, which allowed them to put twice the amount of luminous into these indentations. And then they had the bigger hands with more luminous. The whole idea behind it was known as the high visibility dial. It was a dial you could look at instantly and know and be able to read the time. And that was the origin of the Mercedes hand.
And it's significant now with Rolex, that hand is
Synonymous.
Yeah, synonymous to it. I mean, it's amazing to see, like, one of the first,
Yeah.
and yet it's still got that essence there. You know, and then you go today and you buy a brand new one, and the essence is still there. Yeah. I mean, they are marketing geniuses, and Rolex have got it right for so long. That's why you walk through any airport, there's a Rolex clock.
When did Rolex start product placement in films and things like that? I just think it.
As far as I know, Rolex do not get involved in product placement.
They don't.
No. Directors and actors themselves choose to wear them.
That was the famous thing about James Bond, wasn't it? They wouldn't provide one to the production company, famously.
Oh, the James Bond watch? No, the James Bond watch was not provided by Rolex. It was provided by the director, who took it off his wrist and gave it to Sean Connery. So, you know, this is more like what you should be wearing.
When actually in the books, he's specified as wearing a Rolex America.
Yeah, Ian Fleming was a fan of the Explorer.
Yeah.
In regards to product placement, and in regards to the day date where he gets its name, the president, but a lot of people say that Rolex gifted Datejust rather than the day date to the American president.
They started out in 1945, after the end of the Second World War. Rolex gave Datejust with important serial numbers bizarrely, to the guy who led the Swiss army, as a reward for keeping Switzerland's borders safe during the war. Then they gave them to Churchill, de Gaulle, and Truman. I don't know if Stalin got one or not. And they were all Datejust because the day date didn't exist.
How did it get its name though? Because we call it the president, but when I've looked into it, it was the Datejust that was gifted, it was never the day date.
Eisenhower.
That was the bracelet.
Yeah, Eisenhower got a Datejust and then got a day date. Those were given. The deal was Rolex gave them, I write about it in the book, Rolex gave these watches to important people and said, we don't want any publicity from them. We're giving it to you because we think you deserve it. The key was that all of these people were famous and politicians. And the weird thing is that politicians are photographed all the time and they're often waving at people. So their wrist is up there with their watch.
It's marketing genius, isn't it? I think like
Yeah.
vision.
Yeah.
What he was a real marketer. I just think that is where other watch brands will never be able to do. Because people have got managers now and they've got a lot of money.
Yeah, but what about Formula One drivers who put their watch on after they've won the race?
Yeah.
Do Rolex involved in that?
No,
They're not.
all the brands sponsored drivers or teams. Rolex sponsored the entire fucking circus for 10 years.
10 years.
So the key thing about that was it didn't matter who won, Rolex's name was there. I've spoken to people at Rolex about this, and they said we'll never sponsor a team in anything because they might lose, and we don't want to be seen to be losers. So they sponsor events, and
Going back to the Formula One though,
whoever wins, it's a Rolex event.
Yeah. But going back to Formula One, the big brand is AP in that. Barrichello, Montoya, AP were the ones who put all the racing drivers, Schumacher, on those. But it makes sense of what James is saying. Yes, what if you sponsor a team, you don't want to be the loser.
Yeah.
Well, they did lose, didn't they, with these bloodhounds? They were associated with losing. They never reached the record.
Nope.
That's why that would have been probably the most expensive Rolex in the lineup ever if they'd won and they achieved their objective.
What was that? What was that?
The Air King, the bloodhound. You know, the one with the fives everywhere, the yellow and green. That's the only thing I can think of.
But the point is that they funded the development. They funded the development of it, but it was never publicised because they said we're not publicising until the thing actually works, and they never got enough money to get it to work. Right. So most people don't know that Rolex had anything to do with it.
I was so surprised that it was called the Air King because it wasn't really an Air King. It should have been called the Bloodhound, what I read in your book.
Yeah, that's what I think it should have been called the Bloodhound, but they wanted to keep the name in the catalogue. So.
But what you do see is that every Wimbledon final, they go into their bag and they take this thing and they put the watch on, like Alcaraz with the turquoise. Every year you see that. It's almost the set
When the
picture.
OPs come out with bright red one, yellow one.
And you just see them go into their bag, and after they've won, they just get that watch, and it's always photographed. Yeah, that is quite genius.
It is genius, yeah.
Speaking of Air King, a couple of years ago, I bought these 34mm Air King with a concentric blue dial and orange numbers, and I fell in love with it.
The psychedelic Air King,
And the thing is, for me, the beauty far outweighed the fact that it's a small watch. I've got a couple of questions. The first one is, why didn't they release a bigger case one, like a 39 or a 40?
I've no idea.
You don't know. Do you think concentric dials might come back?
Concentric?
Don't know.
Yeah.
I think there are still some concentric dials in the catalogue. I think there are day dates with them, but it's not popular. You need to get hold of the general catalogue, which is what retailers have, agents, not the catalogue that's available in the shops.
You can actually buy those on eBay. We always search them.
Yeah.
The master catalogues, where you have every bracelet, every dial, every configuration.
Yeah.
It's a great thing to have.
Including what, discontinued stuff?
Well, I've got them back from probably got one downstairs, 2005.
Yeah.
You see any of the older catalogues, fantastic.
Yeah.
You see all the different dials or what they do.
Yeah, and with the purpose of just knowing
sort of what was made and what was then, and it was a genuine dial that came in a watch in a set period.
Yeah.
It's just nice to know. It's not important, it's just, and if you're really interested in that sort of thing, it's a nice thing that will give you the knowledge, that's all.
Yeah,
James, if you're seeing the Rolex CEO next week,
Yeah.
can you ask him a question from me? When can I have a new GMT Coke? When is it coming?
The
Because
Coke.
The Coke. Like, I mean,
Why didn't
we've
you?
thought- but we've
I've
thought-
got the list.
but
Why don't you
we've
speak to
thought
me?
it's been
I've got the
coming
list.
for
I'll
how
put your
long?
name down.
I mean, how long have I said to you,
Right,
Spencer? When are we
I'll tell
getting a
you
new
why,
Coke?
because Rolex, every year, come March, what are Rolex going to do? And everyone talks, and all these AI and junk comes out. They will never ever do what you think they're going to do. They will never discontinue. They're a law unto themselves, and they'll just do whatever they want to do, and that's it.
But every year we sit and we think, it's this year, it's this year. It's
For me, one of the biggest disappointments, I'd say, was the Sprite. I thought that was going to be an absolute game changer. And the numbers I put on that watch, I don't mind admitting, I said that was 35 grand watch.
Yeah.
And put my name to it, paying 35 grand. Lost one, won one, but now they're 12, 13 grand watch.
Yeah, but you sold the first
Complete,
couple for about that price,
complete
so-
collapse.
And when you think they discontinue it, they double
James,
down.
do you not think?
It's, I'm not really an expert on the modern stuff. Yeah. I mean, I'm aware of it.
Now.
Sorry?
I don't know if this was AI at first.
No,
The
it's
table
legit.
clock, Rolex are so unpredictable.
Yeah.
They visit Donald Trump and they give him a Rolex table clock. And
Yeah.
I had a look online. It's what, £15,000? It looks like a replica Submariner on
It's
the
probably
table.
AI. It's probably AI.
No, it's
No,
legit.
no, they're real.
It's legit.
Yeah.
It's legit, yeah.
You need one on the desk.
Depends what you have one next week. Rolex is still on the website. That'd be the next look. Maybe the table clock's coming back in. They've decided.
Do you think that Rolex will continue to maintain the CPO program, given that the only people that seem to take any notice of it or use it are suckers who don't really know what they're doing in the market? I know Rolex don't give a damn what we think anyway, but I mean, they price themselves out, in my view. Will they just maintain it because there are enough suckers in the market?
It's what you have to understand is that CPO is a term borrowed from the motor trade, and particularly borrowed from the American motor trade, where in the US something like 90% of all cars are leased. The theory behind CPO in cars is very simple, that if a car's on lease, it has to be maintained at a certain level by the supplying dealer as part of the lease. So when the car comes in at the end of the 2 or 3 year lease, they know everything about it. They know everything that's done. So people are prepared to pay more for a CPO car than they are for a similarly 3-year-old car from your local garage around the corner who's selling the same car. There is a premium for a CPO product. It's very different for watches in that the retailer who buys it has no idea what's happened to this watch in the 3, 5, 10 years that somebody's owned it. But on the other hand, people are much less rational about what I would call personal jewelry products than they are about a thing like a car. Most people, a car is a utilitarian item. Something like a watch, particularly something like a Rolex or a Patek or an Audemars, is very much an emotional purchase, and they will ignore rational logic to purchase it. Rational logic says you don't buy a Rolex in the first place. Rational logic says you buy a swatch and change it every year. Watches are not rational purchases.
I think it's not a great leap of faith if you know a little bit about watches to know that it doesn't work. Firstly, the way around it is, as with most products, you buy the person you're buying from, so make sure you know who you're buying from. In which case, I could just as easily get it from Spencer as I could from the CPO program, and cheaper, and know that it's going to be a genuine product. But given the CPO program, if you want the backup of Rolex, buy the most, as long as it's genuine, buy the most beat up Rolex you can, take it into Rolex for a service, you'll still end up paying less for the watch and the service than you will if you bought in the CPO program and you'll get it serviced by Rolex.
But you're using rational logic, and watches are an irrational purchase.
There is one business reason for the CPO, and that is for customers to build up purchase history with the AD to buy the watch they really want.
Yeah, that's
So
another way, yeah.
Promise.
It's identical to the pull
Yeah,
model.
it might be an empty promise.
Yes.
I mean, I've got to tell you, I get clients all the time. I think what Patek, Rolex, a lot of them do, of saying buy this and then buy this and we'll put you on this. I think it's not correct. Personally, yeah, that's all. By the time they're buying things that they're losing 20-30% off, they may as well go and buy it on the grey market and they'll end up cheaper and they get it when they want it. But they don't even, just because you buy things you don't want doesn't mean you're definitely going to get it anyway, especially when your manager leaves or something else happens or a watch gets discontinued, you don't get it anyway.
Do you know of any good grey market dealers?
Not at all. I haven't met one yet. And that's being honest.
Yeah, but I don't know if you're honest because you're a grey market here.
Exactly, there isn't one.
His lips are
The thing with the CPO industry, the polishing isn't the same. It doesn't seem like it's done by at Rolex.
The other thing, just to reply to you and Nick at the same time. Nick, in what you said there isn't entirely correct. Because if you buy the most battered Rolex, okay, when it gets polished by Rolex, it will still be pretty battered. Unfortunately, there are things out there and there are ways of refurbing watches now where it's done better than Rolex, yeah? Because Rolex is polishing or their chamfers, they don't, laser welding, which is something everyone knows. You have a watch and you badly damage it. One option is send it back to Rolex and you have a new case with a dodgy serial number and everyone knows it's like a Cat D car. Or you have laser welding where it's done and it is unbelievable. I've seen firsthand some of the work of what they do. It's quite incredible. Rolex don't in. Sorry?
Alex Photi's like.
Yes.
I bought the cheapest submariner and I sent it to Alex Photi.
Correct.
Extra time, and if I've got a quote from Rolex direct themselves, I'll recruit for them. And you know, and I ended up going with Alex for extra time because what they quoted me, what they said they were going to do to the watch would make it technically a Franken watch to a collector.
If you really wanted that, the white label card, whatever the Rolex CPO program is, then you've got an alternative option. I wouldn't give it anyway.
Yeah, but they don't do laser welding, and laser welding, you know, when you have a watch that's got a ding on a shoulder or a nasty ding, laser welding, you can correct that. Rolex don't believe in it, doesn't exist to them. Yeah, so that's where they can't do as good a
But
job.
I would assume that in the first place, Rolex wouldn't take in as a potential CPO watch something with a badly battered case.
Possibly not, but even their polishing, if something, they try and buy better watches, but their polishing isn't as good as some of the people that I've seen.
Maybe that's what the new factory's for.
Well, they can't do laser welding on
Probably
titanium.
charge a lot more as well.
Quite possibly.
You can't have titanium. You can't do it the same way. I had an Amiga and they dinged the lug, the titanium, and they had to replace the case.
Well, that was a Amiga, didn't it?
Talking about the factory.
Actually, sorry, I don't know if anyone knows here. So, going back to Amiga, if you ding a case, and again, Rolex, when we get a Rolex that's had a new case, you know, they have a 44 number. I mean, it's a real like Cat D, as in a
Oh,
car.
really?
Yeah. I'm surprised that you think they manufacturers, they should be able to themselves renumber a case. Put the serial number on, why not? You're in charge of it. Just interesting there, if anyone knows, on Amiga, so you said you had an issue with that.
Yeah.
Would that come back with the same
No.
serial number?
Well, they said they had the same serial
No.
numbers.
No?
So we went back to my AD and she went and asked Amiga directly because we weren't really trusting of what was being told. And she came back and said, no, it would be a different serial number on the case.
Okay. But again, even with Rolex, you're paying all that money. A middle case could cost you 3-4 grand easily. Give you a new card and case number.
Yeah.
Why give you a 44 reference? I mean, it's always been, if ever a watch comes with a 44 reference, we try and stay away. Because people just don't like it.
you touched upon polishing, I was in this grey market shop in Den Haag, and the guy had this lovely smooth bezel ice blue concentric day, and you know, with the Arabic.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken. No, actually, I don't think he did have the Arabic. The Roman ones, but really heavy watch, and it was quite marked up. He did mention about the consideration of it being platinum and there being a slight different quirk to the polishing with the platinum watch and the steel
Platinum's
watch.
the hardest metal in the world to polish.
Yeah.
Really difficult.
And why is that?
Just the properties.
Yeah.
The properties of what platinum is.
Oh, hardest as in.
Yeah.
Just difficult. Just difficult.
Yeah.
It's just difficult to finish
Yeah.
and polish.
Yeah, whereas gold is really soft.
Yeah.
Make a mistake.
Super easy to discolour platinum as well.
Sorry?
Platinum discolours quite easily as well. It loses that shine
Yeah.
really quickly.
Yeah. Sort of goes grey a bit.
Here's one thing. With the land dweller, so you can only get them serviced by Rolex now. Do you think
I
that's-
assume so, yeah.
Yeah, so do you think that's something that they're going to move all movements that way?
Well, I mean, the Landweller's been out for 7 months. Of course you're going to service it by Rolex. I mean, it's still under warranty.
Yeah.
Why would you take it anywhere else?
Yeah. But I mean, they made it so the tooling thing, you have to go back to them. So is that a new big, is that where they want the business to be? Is that their...
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, with the new escapement, I'm assuming that there are a limited number of people who are capable of working on it.
So the 1908 phone, is it the same?
No, 1908 doesn't have the... it has the new movement, but not the new escapement. It has the old... oh, God, what's the name of the escapement? Anyway, yeah. It has the silicium, that's right, yeah.
Since you're talking about the Landweller and the new caliber that they produced, and as I recruit in the industry, and I talk to a lot of WASP certified watchmakers, and the ones that are accredited said to me they're travelling out to Rolex, and I'm assuming maybe that factor is more of a training academy to get them trained up to deal with the new calibers. So I'm making an assumption maybe it's that, I don't know. So when you do talk to the CEO, maybe you find out what is really going on with that at the moment, because there's been an exodus of watchmakers in the UK that are out working with Rolex at the moment. So just find it a bit strange.
I know nothing. I will endeavour to increase my knowledge base in the next week or so.
It was really good.
Brilliant, right. Anyone want to sign?
All right, well, thank you very much.
If anyone would like a watch signed, James is here.
Yep.
If anyone wants to buy a watch, I'm here.
Anyone wants a whiskey, the bar's free.